Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back. Daphne, how are you?
I am fantastic.
I am ready to invest some time with you today.
Well, and we will be. And it is. Don't you find it an investment?
It is absolutely investment. There are times when in the past, I would say, oh my gosh, look at all these things I have to do today. And as you are very much aware, I've become much more intentional about where I am investing my time. And
Yes.
now every time I look at my calendar, it's always like, oh my gosh, look what I get to do today.
Yeah. And you're pointing out such a benefit of this way of thinking about how we are utilizing our energy, our attention, all of it. You know, we put it through the lens of time. And you're pointing out what happens when you are intentional and seeing what we're going to talk about two parts of this, but what you're doing in the world as an investment of time versus like, I have to, it flips the script on yourself, right? You're like, oh, now I want to do these things. And I think a big part of what we're talking about today is, you know, we can talk about, you know, how we're spending our time, which is very different than how we're investing it. And that's what we're really going to talk about today.
Welcome to Life, the ultimate choose-your-own adventure game with hosts Cliff Ravenscraft and Daphne Scott. Join this dynamic duo as they explore the profound concept of life as a thrilling adventure, blending ancient wisdom and modern psychology. Embrace the joy of living with presence, creativity, and playfulness. It's time to navigate the game of life together. Are you ready to play? Let the adventure begin.
So today I got the embrace the joy of
So did
presence.
I cannot believe you. That's what I got. Embrace the joy.
Yes.
I don't know. It's hard for me.
Is it?
No, I probably
Okay.
need to like get a little more, a little more equanimity.
You know, that is you bring that up. We're not talking about equanimity today.
We can.
But we maybe another episode because I think that would be worthy. When I've been pursuing this personal and professional development and growth and all this other stuff, I have oftentimes worked very diligently to not allow myself to get pulled down emotionally when things don't go exactly how I want them to go and all this other stuff. But yet I still find myself celebrating like nobody's business. I mean, major nervous system overdrive on the opposite end when things go exactly the way I want them to go. And I think there's a potential danger in that.
Well, there can be. You know what? I'm not going to say much because we're going to make this the next topic on the show.
Excellent.
I have so many things to say, and I'm just like, I'll just get down a rabbit hole here. So let's make that our next topic will be some form of conversation around equanimity, a balanced perspective.
A balanced approach to our emotions.
Balanced approach to emotion. For today, though, we're going to talk about how we are investing our time. You know, the language around time I find it so curious because we often use language that we could also relate back to money, which I do find really curious. So, you know, how we're spending our time, how we spend our money. Are we investing our time? We're investing money. Are we wasting money? Are we wasting our time? And really this conversation is around seeing that what we are doing with our time. We're going to talk about a little bit about the being side of this too, but what we're doing with our time and giving it a reframe to really understand it as an investment. You might say an investment in what? Because when we make an investment, we're often thinking about getting a return, right? So I landed on, and I'll tell you where this whole thought process was born from in my head. But when I invest, if I'm thinking about, okay, I'm doing this thing or I'm reading this book or whatever I'm doing, I'm investing my time in my own personal development, professional development, whatever category I want to put it in. And I am expecting some form of a return. So my return may be, I might think that it might make me a little bit more joyful in that moment, or I'm looking to learn something. So I think by investing my time in reading this article or reading this book or studying this thing that I'll learn something. at the end of the day, what I recognized, and I don't know if this is true for you, Cliff, but what I recognize is I'm making all these investments for the overall well-being that I would like to experience in my life, right? When I take my last breath, that I have taken advantage of the opportunity I have to be on this planet and added to my well-being and hopefully the well-being of others. So I don't, this is where I sort of landed on, okay, I'm making these investments. And if I see it that way, what is the return? How am I compounding my interest, so to speak, with what I'm doing? So I don't know if that's how you relate to it, but I'd be curious.
Prior to this topic, when I saw it in the outline for this week's episode, the concept of investment when it comes to time certainly has come across my path, and there are many aspects of it that resonate with me. I don't know that it's necessarily an approach that I've consciously spent a lot of time saying, this is my investment of time and I hope to get a return on investment, and what's that return going to be before I choose to make this. Although I think subconsciously I am kind of making those processes and weighing the pros and benefits. I'm sure it's there. Some of the concepts that really resonate with me when we think about using some of the terminology from money and equating it to time and relating it to time, that same language, I know that I'm very conscious of when somebody says, I don't want to waste your time. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but I don't know where you thought you had that power. but you can't do that. That's my time. I mean, you can waste your time, but you cannot waste mine. So and that typically comes up when I said, hey, I know that our coaching session is over. I have some margin in my schedule. I definitely would love to continue this conversation if you're interested. No expectation, and I want to be respectful of your time. What do you think? And it usually goes, oh, Cliff, that would be great, but I just want to make sure we're not wasting your time. And I just freely chose to make the offer of investing this time with you. And I always have the freedom to say no to any time commitment.
Ooh, you're getting right at the root. Right through. It's a little bit of what we talked about last week with boundaries, but yeah, you have the right, you have the ability to say no.
Yeah. So at some levels, I do resonate with the language. I definitely resonate with the whole idea of time as investment. I just don't know that it resonates with me personally in my experience, that I think about it consciously of, okay, I'm going to go over here and I want to see what the ROI, I want to process what's the ROI on this. There are times I very much do that in certain areas of my life. And in other areas, I just am happy just to, if you will, I'm happy to just spend time doing something.
Right. You're just happy well, this is what we're going to talk about. I mean, this is it. So let me tell you where this landed for me, where this sort of kind of bubbled up in my head. I've been, as you know, working a lot on my writing. I'm writing a lot of long form, non-literary posts, I guess they would call them. But I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the coffee shop. I'd like to get out of my regular environment, kind of go get a coffee. It sounds very nice idea to do this. So I walk over to the coffee shop, and it's maybe 10 minutes from my house. I have a couple that I walk to. So I walk over there. And when I get there, first of all, it's packed for some reason. I'm not the only one who's working from home, I guess, anymore. So there's a really long, there was a fairly long line. It was probably, I waited in it. So it was about 20 minutes. And as I was standing there, I thought, if I was at home and made my own coffee, I'd be writing right now. And so it was about 20 minutes that I was in the line when I could have been already, working on my writing. And I had this moment. It was an ROI type of it was an ROI moment. I'm like, wow, 20 minutes. And by the way, I want to be really clear. I have complete and total control over my schedule. I am not a person who feels time compressed rarely ever at this point in my life, or feel the time pressure. And I was like, wow, I wonder I wonder if this 20 minutes was really, a great investment of my time to wait for this coffee. Was the coffee that outstanding as being in this environment? So I just started asking myself a bunch of questions, and that's where this idea came from. Like, how am I investing this moment? And I leveraged it as best I can. So this is a little bit what you were talking about too. I think where you were leaning just a little bit. Okay, the fact was I was in line. I could have walked out. I could have, and I decided that I wanted to be in the coffee shop. I decided that that's what I wanted to do. As I stood there and I looked at the line and I'm doing my evaluation. And then I used the time to think about my writing. So it wasn't time. It wasn't time not well spent. And I looked around and watched, some people. Nevertheless, if you ask me if I wanted to do that again, the answer is probably no. So I said to myself, okay, if you choose to go to the coffee shop again and you see the line like that, you might choose to not spend time in the coffee shop and not spend that 20 minutes waiting in line, right? So it wasn't something, when I looked at it, when I put it through the lens of investing, that I would probably choose to invest my time waiting 20 minutes in line for a coffee. So
right.
Yeah, that's where this all came from. And I thought, well, what does it really look like when we're investing in our time? What's that mean?
Well, there are a couple of stories that come to my mind as you share that story. This weekend, yesterday, Sunday, Stephanie and I go shopping every week together. And this week, when we typically would have gone to one store first, we would have gone to Trader Joe's first, then to Costco, then to Kroger.
Okay.
But when we looked on the expressway, we saw that there's construction, 3 lanes down to 1, and it was an absolute standstill on the way towards Trader Joe's.
All right.
So I said, Stephanie, would you like to go in reverse order, start with Kroger, then go to Costco, then to Trader Joe's? She goes, yes, that's a great idea. Before we left the house, I noticed that my tire sensor said that one of my tires is low. And so I'm like, hey, do you mind if we stop and fill up our tire? Or that I air up the tire? And she says, sure, let's do that. So we're sitting there and there's a Jeep in front of us. And this woman, older woman, is trying to figure out how to use the credit card thing on the air pump situation. She's not having a good time of it. Finally decides to get in the car after about 7 minutes of fiddling with it. And then she gets in the car, and I think she would pull up and allow somebody else to give it a shot while she figures out what she's going to do next. But instead, she just gets on her phone and starts talking to somebody. and I'm like, And so, and the interesting thing is like, okay, there's 7 minutes that have just gone by. And the old version of me would have said, wow, this is incredibly inconvenient. What is going on here? I can't believe this, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like,
yeah.
And I just observed it and I'm like, well, that's not how I wanted to spend the last 7 minutes. But Stephanie, what do you think about we go into Kroger and we air up on the way out? And she says, okay. Now the question is was that a waste of time? And one of the things that occurs to me is there's some part of me, Daphne, that feels like there's sort of a reason for everything.
Oh, yeah.
And I believe in synchronicity and things aligning or whatever. And whether people think it's a little woo-woo or a little just out there, but did I avoid some sort of car accident because I was not in an intersection 7 minutes earlier than I would have been had that not taken place?
Yeah.
And then I was reading, let's see here, it's something Buddhist, Finding Buddha, Finding Christ, or something like that by Thich Nhat Hanh. And I was reading about him talking about the Buddhist principles, and he says, somebody asked him, what are the practices of Buddhists? What are the things that you do? And he says, well, we eat, we walk, and we sleep, or whatever. It's like, wait, those aren't spiritual practices. It's like, no, but when we're walking, we know that we're walking. When we're sitting, we know that we're sitting. When we're sleep, and it's this whole idea of being present with yourself in the moment. And the one thing I will say is that was not wasted 7 minutes. During that 7 minutes, I was aware that I was waiting for that 7 minutes. It was a valuable observation. There was parts of me that's asking myself, what's going on inside of my physical body? How am I reacting and responding to this? And what are the thoughts? And it was just an incredible, curious few moments of evaluating. It's like, wow, I really have come a long way, that this really doesn't bother me.
Yeah. And I would say it's even arguable at that point that you were waiting for anything, really, right? Like you wanted to fill your tire up with air. Nevertheless, when the moment in that moment when you were present, there really was no waiting. You were simply present to what you were doing in that moment.
Exactly.
Waiting implies the future, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And so that story resonated with me. That story came up for me as I'm thinking about you sitting in the coffee shop it's like, yeah, I definitely have been in those scenarios. It's like, man, I really want to get to my writing. And it's like, yeah. It's interesting. And
it is.
For me, there are many times when I'm like, I definitely wonder. The other story that comes up for me is the fact that I have thousands of dollars worth of workout equipment in a gym in my home. I literally could walk there in less than 60 seconds. Mm-hmm. I never work out from home. Instead, I travel 25 minutes to the gym at Planet Fitness and 25 minutes home every day. And I do that because I love what happens during that time on the commute to the gym and during that time on the way home from the gym. And while that's 50 minutes that some people might say, that's completely wasted time. It's completely wasted fuel in your car. It's completely wasted all of this. Why don't you just work out from home? And I'm like, it's how I choose to invest my time.
Yes. And that's right there is the whole point. You're choosing. And it feels like an investment to you, right? I think, man, there's so many things. I want to walk back at least 7 sentences. So one of the things I love is how we keep drifting into the whole thing about, is it good or bad? Who knows? Which is the whole equanimity conversation. So who knows? And the second is, I think this is very critical and important. I think if we try to get into what is an investment of what specifically is an investment of someone's time and what isn't, that is really dangerous territory. For the example that you just gave, right? It's a perfect one about you could work out at home. That it doesn't do it for you for right now. There was a time that it did. Mm-hmm. For right now, it doesn't. And you feel that the driving over to the gym and what you're doing in that period of time does feel like an investment to you. It's important to you. And I think the critical piece is you're choosing it. That's what this whole show is about, right? It's choosing. This is how Cliff plays the game.
Yeah.
And in Cliff's world over there on Planet Cliff, one of the ways he plays the game that feels like an investment is he gets up at 4 a.m. I think I'm correct on that.
Yep.
He gets up at 4 a.m. and he does his rituals. And one part of that ritual is getting to the gym, right? By 5 a.m., he's in the car and he's doing his thing. And you're also recording from there as well. You're doing your Train with Cliff audio journal at times. So, there's an investment there. There's something about that that's important to you. I would never get into someone else's world about what they should be doing. Yeah. That's crazy cakes, right? What's more important to me is having the conversation around the intentionality that we have and how we're framing our time. I mean, you really brought up right at the beginning of the show, like we could be victims at the effect of time. And I think that is definitely how I lived my life for a very long time. There was never enough of it. And then when I got enough of it, I was bored. Right? So it never seemed like there was enough or there was always too much. Yeah.
I definitely have experienced boredom before.
Yes. And I think having that intentionality of like, let's pretend for the sake of argument, it's just so crazy. I almost can't do it in my mind because I can't think of something that would be a total waste of time that would apply to everyone. I don't have right. I just can't. So it's really the individual. And I think more so, it's really how you're choosing to see that moment in your life too.
I think I could argue, although I think there's value in every experience. So that's the thing.
There's going to be one actually.
But I think if I was to sit down and if I'm waiting in traffic, for example. I'll give you a perfect example of this. I'm waiting in traffic on a holiday weekend. We're traveling, a good 8-hour trip. And here I've been sitting in traffic for the last 2.5 hours and we haven't moved an inch. Right. Yeah. And so I think what I could view for myself, at least, as a waste of time is to be very upset, very angry, and be very bitter and resentful of the fact that I'm sitting in traffic.
That is where I really want to go.
Now, here's what I want to say is I could argue very heavily for that to be considered, by my own standards, a waste of time. Mm-hmm. Except for if I become conscious to the effects that are not pleasant, and there are some consequences that happen, and I become very much the victim of the consequences of my own action of complaining and letting this happen, and it's totally destroying the whole family vibe in the car. If I become aware of that, and then all of a sudden I get into the place where I observe it, and then all of a sudden I say, do I want more of that? It's like, then all of a sudden it wasn't a waste at all. It was a gift to see that reactive, triggered, emotional stuff was still inside of me. And so therefore it was an incredibly valuable return on investment.
Maybe the people in the car don't feel it that way.
They probably did not. But
okay, but you are go ahead, because you are getting it really the one place where I think people may not recognize how and where they're investing their time.
Okay.
And even up to this point in the conversation, we've really talked about what I would call our external world, right? Going to the coffee shop, where we're driving, what we're doing, more the doingness side of things, right? As an investment of time. But I also want to talk about, do we invest our time in the consciousness gym?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how are we investing our time even in our own heads, our own consciousness? And that's what you were getting to right there. And I think this is a place where we can fall asleep. Me personally as well can fall asleep. And that when I'm doing exactly what you just described, so life doesn't go the way I would prefer. I'm trying to get to my destination. There's an accident, by the way, and there's no choice for me. Let's use traffic. I think it's such a good one. And I've been in this, I'm driving, I'm wanting to get to my next destination in Chicago. This was when I lived there. It was a daily occurrence. You think you've left with plenty of time. There's an accident. I'm sitting on the Eisenhower. No one's moving. And there's not the option at the moment for me to exit the highway, to take an alternative route. So, at that moment, we have a choice. I mean, we always have a choice. I can't exit. I can't get anywhere. Can't take an alternate route to where I'm going. So the choice then is, okay, where do I want to invest do I want to invest my time, this moment in the car? Do I want to invest that in complaining, in blaming, and judging, and criticizing? By the way, everyone else. Mostly, we do it with ourselves too. And that's
unfortunately, that's the case. And that can be more damaging than anything.
I think it is. Yeah, I absolutely. Well, and I think by the time we're doing it, externally to other people, we've probably been doing it to ourselves pretty harshly. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. Usually. So yeah, I mean, and what's the return on that investment?
Yeah. There's a saying that what is suffering? And suffering is any time that you're living outside of the present moment. So in that moment, we might think, okay, there is no option for me to take my car magically out of this sea of cars between exits. So Cliff, that I don't have that option. But the question is where is your mind? Is your mind in the future of where you had anticipated that you would be? Or is it in the past? I coulda, shoulda, woulda taken that exit earlier when my wife told me that the GPS said that there's an accident ahead. Take this exit now. And so the thing is or could I just be here now and realize it's like, well, listen, I had expectations of where I would be. I had, I certainly had my options back then. I chose what I chose. This is the scenario that I'm in. And the question is can I accept it?
Yes.
Can I surrender to what is? And what does it make possible? What could we do here sitting in traffic that would not have been possible otherwise? What great things could come out of this?
Yes. And the impact that that has on, and I think this is where I landed on the, okay, what's the return on that investment, right? So I'm going to invest my time, my energy, my consciousness into a place of acceptance, into a place of a little bit more balanced, probably emotion. We might say positive emotion, maybe. I'm going to invest there versus the other place where I could invest it, which is to blame, judge, criticize, keep doing that racket. What is the return on that investment? And for me, my return on that investment, when I do by the way, these are just shifts, right? I'm just shifting all the time. I mean, I just want to, rapid fire shifting. When I catch myself in that place, it's just a matter of making that shift, which takes practice. At least it's taken me a lot of practice for many, many years. But what's the investment of that? And, for certain for me, Cliff, what I find is that, first of all, I enjoy those moments way more than I would otherwise. I also notice things around me that I may not have noticed. Also, like the person's face that I'm sitting with, for example, the sounds around me. I may really have an appreciation for things, even if I was sitting on a highway, appreciation for things that I'm seeing along the side of the road, as an example. So I noticed that my energy shift in that way, choosing to invest my time that way in a consciousness level, right, a higher vibration of consciousness, creates many, many more pathways for me to enjoy my life. And here's the thing, it isn't just about me. It most oftentimes also creates a pathway for others. And I've noticed, I don't know if you've had this experience, but I have noticed that when I choose to have my consciousness in a higher vibration and to choose those paths, people around me seem to change too in many ways. Not always. It isn't about trying to control other people, but it creates an energy. It creates an environment where people can start to enjoy themselves. I'll give you an example from the coffee shop. So I was standing there busy. The woman behind the counter very clearly doing her best to keep up with everyone that needed to, be served in that moment. And I could tell she's a little frazzled. She comes up, breathing heavily. She's looking at the little register thing, barely giving me any eye contact. And I just noticed it. And I said, "Hey, how's your day going?" And just gave her a real simple smile,
That's,
and she looked,
Daphne, that right there is why you were at that coffee shop and waited in line, because the universe needed you to be that for her that day.
Yeah. And it was simple enough.
Yeah.
And it was that moment. And she looked up and she goes, "Oh my gosh, we're so busy in here." And I'm like, "Yeah, I noticed." And I'm like, "I want to tell you, I think you're handling it swimmingly." And she's like, "Thank you. I really appreciate that." And it just created that moment. And I am certain I am not the only person on the planet who has had this experience or has offered that experience to someone else. And if you haven't, please try it. Nevertheless, it shifted. I could feel the energy shift for her. I could feel this moment of spaciousness come into the environment. And the point that I'm making is that I had a choice of how I wanted to relate in my own consciousness. I chose to invest differently. And that created a lot of return, not just for myself, but for the people around me.
Yeah.
And I think that's really that to me is the compounding of interest, right? It's not just about me. It actually creates it elsewhere.
That it does. And it's a ripple effect, because here's what I already pictured this in my mind. Not only did you shift everything in her state by your interaction with her, but she was then in that better state for every person who was in line after you.
Bingo.
And potentially it changed her state to where when she went home, if she has children, how she interacts with her children. I mean, these things have massive ripple effects. And so I love the idea of that. It's like, okay, what's my investment in my consciousness in this moment where I'm otherwise in a situation that I might not have preferred, but what does this make possible? How can I bring the best of who I am and what I have to offer to this situation? I love that.
Thank you. And here's what's crazy. So rewind when I first got in line and then had did my work, just like you were doing your work when you were in the, getting your tire filled up or desiring to get your tire filled up, exact same situation. Nothing changed in the situation. I still was a woman standing. That's what I was doing, right? We could call it waiting. We could do whatever. But at the root, I was a woman standing, a person standing. That's all that was happening. And yet the whole world looked different.
Yeah, it
Same
does.
situation.
Because you are looking at the world through a different filter of consciousness.
Yes.
You have chosen a higher vibration of appreciation, of possibility, of hope, and that allows you to look around and see the world from a completely different perspective than upset, anger, rushed, overwhelmed, all of the other stuff. And then all of a sudden you look around and you, from that state, you see the world in a completely different way.
Bingo. So I don't know. We're the investment of our time. Maybe.
I love it. So I want to bring up.
And I also want to acknowledge what you pointed out too. Like when you go the other direction, there's learning there if you're open to it too. However,
everything is useful. Everything. I believe every experience of life brings about some level of return on investment if you're willing to look for it.
Yeah. And if you're willing to learn, and I would add to it also, I had many learnings in my life, some that I would say were friendlier than others.
Yeah.
And the universe does have its way of getting you your learnings. You can learn it in a real friendly way. One of my teachers would say, the universe kind of taps you on the shoulder lovingly until eventually you require a 2x4.
Yeah.
So I like the tap on my shoulder. Hey, pay attention, wake up a little bit, but yeah, exactly. You're going to get it one way or the other.
So Daphne, I have, that I experienced what I consider to be, and you and I both are very familiar with the language of like a spiritual awakening.
Yes.
Back in 2020 throughout that time frame. And I oftentimes go back to say, what was the catalyst of that? And by the way, so far I've found at least 50 or 60 things that seem to be somewhat of a catalyst for this. It's like everything in my life was conspiring for me to have this experience. So, but one of them, I have a day one journal entry. I'm looking Friday, September 18th, 2020, 7:02 a.m. And it's titled Loving the A-Time Logger App.
Oh, Time Logger. I love that app.
Yes. By the way, you can find this at atimelogger.com. So atimelogger.com. You introduced me to this app.
Yes, that's right. I remember us talking about it.
So one of the things that I had decided is that, I feel like my days are just slipping by. And it seems like I feel like all day, every day, I'm doing things that are important. Yet at the end of the day, I don't know really, if you were to ask me, what'd you do today? And I could think of, and by the way, let's just say it's a good solid 8 to 10 hour day of just doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And I might have done 20 things. But if you ask me, what did you do today? If you were my wife and she says, hey, Cliff, what'd you do today? I said, And I might be able to come up with 2 or 3 things. And none of those would have taken more than an hour or maybe 2 or 3 hours. And I'm like, what did I do today? Where is my time going? And this is something that I was running into. And what I realized is that I was just living life through hypnotic rhythm. I was just going with whatever came my way, whatever this, whatever that, whatever commitments I made 5 years ago. I'm still living into those commitments today. They actually are no longer commitments. They're obligations to me now. But it's like, where is my time going? And so you told me about this app and I went and I set it up, and being the type of person that I am, I created a category for everything.
Everything. Yeah, I understand.
I mean, there's a category that has an icon of a toilet that says bathroom break.
did the same thing. I didn't say bathroom, but I think I put it in self-care and hygiene.
Self-care and hygiene.
I just want to call out, if who's you're listening to us, I promise you we're not entirely insane.
Not entirely. So, but I started to track, where am I spending all of my time? And what I love about this app is you can set all these categories and you just tap on an icon and it starts a timer. Whenever you are doing that activity, start it. And the great thing is what I loved about this app is that sometimes you're doing an activity that's multiple categories. And you can tap all of them, and it has all of the different timers. And when you're finished with a category, when you just click the little stop icon, and boom, it tracked it. And it has reports. And you could see how many minutes or hours you spent doing this today, this week, this month. Oh my gosh, Daphne, it completely woke me out of this hypnotic rhythm. I'm like, there is no way I'm going to continue my life like this. And I began to get very intentional about cutting some things, but I wasn't even aware that I was doing them.
Yeah. And the other thing that I found when I was actually just looking through mine from 2023, I was just trying to get just a year. The other thing that it brought to my attention was, for example, like we could make an argument, and I love that you brought this up. We could make an argument like commuting. What a waste of time. Right? Again, to come back to sort of our earlier conversation, what I discovered was that I would track that. And so commuting for me at the time was like going from I put it in this bucket, going for anytime I had to physically go from point A to point B outside of my home. I was like, okay, that's my operational definition of commuting. Didn't matter if I was going to the store. Didn't matter if didn't matter. Just that's me having to relocate my body. And it was I was trying to look at I think it must have been the month of November of last year or something, but it was about 23 hours. And it was interesting to me that when I looked at it, I was like, oh, and to your point about double categories, well, I knew that when I was in the car for any period of time, I rarely ever just got in the car and didn't listen to a podcast or didn't listen to an audiobook. So I started tracking that together. So commuting, audiobook, personal development.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so it was leveraging, taking advantage of that opportunity. And back to your point earlier about, is it really a waste of time? It helped me see, and my point was this, it helped me see like, oh, I do have this opportunity to commute. How do I use that as an opportunity? How do I make that an investment of my time? Yeah. Right. If you need to commute, if you need to relocate yourself to someplace.
I love that. And here's the thing that I want to just toss in here. It's a little side note. I work from home. Like I said, I have a home gym, so I don't need to commute to the gym, but I do so 5 days a week. Why do I do that? Here's one of the reasons why. I think I'm almost positive there's research, and you'll probably know, out there that is scientifically proven that when the body is in motion and you're listening to something, it drives it into the memory in a different way than if you were stationary. And here's how I know that is true. Because if you were to ask me, Cliff, what is your definition of a belief? And I said, well, I will tell you what my definition of a belief today is. A belief is nothing more than a thought that you feel certain is true. And I'll never forget the day that I heard that the first time from Tony Robbins. I was on the way home from Planet Fitness to my house, and I was on 275 East, and I was just passing Mineola Pike. And as I think about that phrase, I can see in my mind's eye where I was on the highway and what I was passing as I think about that moment.
Isn't that interesting? And
I have that. It's like things that I hear, and I listen to a lot of audio trainings and conference materials and audio books and learning stuff. And I definitely recall. So I remember listening to, I think it's called A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle.
Yes.
And I was doing a road trip down to Western Kentucky University and back, college stuff with kids. And I came back and it'd been a couple of months, and then I wanted to listen to something again, one of the chapters. So I listened to it again. And as I was listening to it a second time, literally I saw different places on the road trip in my mind as I heard it. I remember where I was when I heard this. I remember where I was when I heard that. I remember where I was when I heard that. And the reason why I know that there are scientific proof of this, because they've done this research with Alzheimer's patients. Who have, lost a lot of their memory and cognition and all this other stuff, but they play music. And then all of a sudden that music has associated with it places and times and memories of the past that are stored. And so there's something about that is there. So anyway, that's why for me, even though I don't need to commute, I actually go and get out there. And I said, Stephanie, I want to go for a drive. She goes, go ahead. She's never asked me, where are you going? Because she knows there's nowhere I need to go. I said, I'm just going to go for a drive. And I just go for a drive and I listen to things. Yeah. Because it's just that I love that aspect of it. It's a great investment. It's a great investment. And there's something to the motion. There's absolutely something. I had the same experience back in the day when I was doing more acting. It was much easier for me to memorize my lines when we would get the blocking. So blocking is where you're going to stand, where you have to move, point A to point B here in this scene. And then your character moves over here. And then it was much easier for me to remember my lines once the blocking was done than just memorizing them rote or just standing, reading them with my scene partner. So there is absolutely something to place and time and what we're hearing and what we're saying that really matters. By the way, I've listened to A New Earth so many times, the audiobook, that I can do his accent and his voice. It's like him. So, that is a great book.
It's probably one of the books that definitely in my top 3.
My favorite concept that I learned from Eckhart Tolle is the pain body.
Yeah.
That is such a profound concept.
It is profound. Maybe we'll do a show on that.
Okay.
I really that it is very profound, and it really fits in a lot with, you and I've touched on this here and there, but that really fits in, and it fits in a little bit with this conversation with the conditioned patterns that we have. We carry around the pain bodies of our ancestors. We've talked about this, I think, on a previous episodes, but we carry around these pain bodies. We carry around, and we can catch sort of that energy, that emotional contagion. That is a real thing, by the way. It's not, again, he landed on it from his ancient wisdom and his own consciousness and his own awakening he went through. And then there's all this research that supports it too. So emotional contagion is a real thing, and we can carry that. I mean, I was just sharing a story of that, right? With the lady in the coffee shop. So it's a real thing. Yeah. So that book is, there are many things in that book that.
So Daphne, in our outline, do we have anywhere in there to talk about where are we investing our time? Like the buckets, the categories?
Yeah, I didn't outline it that way, but we can. I mean, I don't know what categories you like, but I tend to think of things as emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical.
Okay.
So big buckets.
I love those buckets.
Yeah.
For me, the way that I think about these things, I think about specific routines and habits. Yeah. These are things that and of course they fit into the bigger buckets, obviously, but some of the things that are absolutely essential for me as far as investing, if I'm going to think about my 24 hours each day and however many minutes that is each day, there's no doubt in my mind that every day I want a absolute minimum of 10 to 20 minutes of meditation, if not more. So that is an investment of my time that is absolutely essential. Agreed. Another one for me is I want to journal every day, whether that is like 3 to 5 sentences or 30 to 50 pages. It doesn't matter to me as long as I journal. Now, I don't do it every single day, except for this month so far, but I have seasons where I journal consistently, almost every single day, and I prefer to make sure that that's a part of my life. The next category for me is I always want to invest in growth and study and note-taking. Those all 3 are combined in one thing for me. So quite frankly, I don't like to read something that is study work. I mean, I like fiction. That's fine. But if I'm going to read something to learn, I don't like to learn something if I don't also have the time and take the time to actually take some sort of note on it. Yeah. So you truly consume it. You don't just skim it. That's correct. I take it in, and I'm not only that. I want to integrate it. So, sometimes it takes me what sometimes will take somebody a week to read a book. I might take 3 or 4 months to go through that same book. Like I'm still going through motivational interviewing, by the way.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And it's a great book, and I'm learning immense, great new resources and wonderful things for my coaching there. So I appreciate that. But anyway, so those are the buckets that I love. And another big bucket for me is both sleeping at night, and another bucket of investment is taking a nap in the middle of the day, which I see as two distinct different things. There's sleeping at night, and then there's my nap during the day. They have separate purposes, and they're both investments that I want to be very intentional about having on a daily basis. Sleep, obvious, but not everybody has the nap.
Not everybody has a nap. And, unfortunately, I think we're getting probably a little bit more aware of it, but unfortunately, I do think that sleep is a huge part that people miss out on, don't put enough attention on their life, don't make enough of an investment in their sleep. I mean, they have in most instances demonstrated that your health is, it's very important for your health and your well-being. So sleep.
And then the other categories, obviously I want just recreation. That for me is an important investment of time with my wife, time with my family. And then as a business owner, I've never struggled to put time into my business.
No, you haven't.
So that's never been an issue. But what has been a major issue for me in the past, I continue to work out little kinks in the road, and I'm working out some of that now. But I have a tendency to work a lot in my business, doing the activities of the business.
Yes.
And one of the big buckets that I have left untouched sometimes is investing a significant amount of time, not acting in the business, but really creatively thinking about where are the best returns on investments of my time. And sometimes sitting down thinking about what I want to do in my business is a better return on an investment than actually getting paid to do something in my business.
Yeah. I mean, this is great. And I want to talk, we're going to speak, right? I want to speak to the business owner. I want to speak to the person who's working for somebody else, because this applies to both what you're pointing to. And it really is about, when we talk about where you're investing your time, Cliff, I would imagine, and it's true for me too, there are places where it is absolutely critical for my well-being that I am doing the thing that needs to be done in the business, right? And I'm the best to do it. And in my life, that's probably true. For example, maybe I enjoy doing the dishes, right? Like I enjoy doing some of that. So I don't mind doing those things. There are also a lot of things where it is not a wise investment of my time because I'm not going to get the return on the investment. For example, mowing my lawn. Yep. There are people better at it. They are better suited to do it. And I don't like it. So, this is, and what you were talking about with your business, right? There are certain parts of your business, like you are absolutely the best and the only person that should be doing X. And there are places where it is probably, and you have discovered this over time, I'm sure, as have I, time to delegate things to other people and or just simply eliminate it.
Eliminating is fun.
Eliminate it. Oh, it's so fun. It's so fun. It's like one of my favorite things to do. And I think that's the place where, and again, I think this conversation fits in perfectly with what we talked about last week with boundaries, because to give yourself permission to say, I'm simply not going to do that thing anymore, right? I don't enjoy it. I don't want to do it. And when I look at what investment, what return am I getting from that, it's really not beneficial. And then there's the delegate it. Like this thing does matter. I want this thing in my business, or I want this thing in my life. I do prefer to have a mowed lawn, and it would probably be best for me to delegate that to someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think when people look at, I don't know if you've ever done this exercise with yourself, but I've done it. When I look at if I looked at what my hourly rate was It was better for me to go spend more time doing the thing I was getting paid to do and generate more revenue that way for myself to pay the person to mow the lawn than it was for me to be out mowing the lawn.
Yeah, this is something that I have had a habit of doing quite some time ago, where I look at the task at hand and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to let somebody else do that and I will pay them. Yeah. And this has become a point of contention at some point for some people in my family. So that I'm just going to share it. Okay. So
do it.
My oldest daughter is like, hey, Dad, it's time to do my taxes again. I'm like, oh, let me go and get you your login to hnrblock.com so that you can do that and just follow the instructions. Dad, aren't you going to help me? I'm like, no, I'm not going to help you do your taxes this year. I'll tell you what, here are two things. One, here's the login to your hnrblock.com. It's got everything in there. Or two, here's a number to a CPA or tax person who will actually file this for you. But no, I am not going to sit down for the next 45 minutes to an hour to fill out and do your taxes. I don't do my own taxes anymore. And I don't want to do your taxes. I love you. We can go out for ice cream later.
Yes.
We can go to the zoo later. We can do a lot of things, but what I will not do is your taxes.
Yes.
I know that I did them last year. I know that I did them the year before that, but that's over. And then my son is like, hey, Dad, it's time for me to do my taxes. I'm like, I'm sorry, son, but you did them for Megan. I said, I know it's not fair. Life is not fair, son. I am so sorry, but I'm going to tell you, it's just not going to happen. Here's hnrblock.com.
And they can help you. And guess what? They want to do your taxes.
Yep.
They're thrilled. They could not be more excited to do your taxes.
And so there's just been a number of things, and there's other little things that come up on the house and things like that. And sure, I've got a toolbox. Sure, I have some experience doing some handy things every now and then. Phone call. Hey, I've got this thing going on. Can you come out and take care of it? And he's like, all you need to do is get your shop vac and detach that thing. And I'm like, yeah. So are you telling me you don't want me to pay you to do that? He's like, yeah, but I'm going to charge you this amount. Yes. Can you do that today or tomorrow? Sure. And they're completely dumbfounded. It's like, and by the way, they're coming here and they're actually, I'm sitting here at my desk working on my computer while they're doing it. It's like, I can't believe he's not doing this. This is the most ridiculous thing. This is going to be 15 minutes, blah, blah, blah. It's like, but I just don't want to do that.
Yeah, I don't want to do it. And while you're doing that, I could be over here coaching another person.
Yep.
Right? Yep. Like my time, my genius in the world is to do that, and not the thing that is your genius to do. Right.
And you know, and one could argue, well, Cliff, do it when you're not coaching somebody where you're getting paid more money. It's like, no, I'd rather rather be crafting an email that might actually entice the next person to sign up for my coaching. That would be a better use of my time than, running the exhaust thing from the shop vac to clean out the air duct where birds have made a nest in the such and such.
Right. Which that person can do easily. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think we just have lofty goals, like lofty ideas. Something breaks like that. I'm like, I can't do that. Like, I'm going to hire somebody to take care of that. Yeah, for sure. Yes.
And what the other thing I'm not going to ever do, I'm not going to change the oil in my car anymore. No. I'm not going to change my brakes. These are things that I'm at a place where zone of competence.
Yeah, zone of competence
is what those things are for me. And somebody else, that's their zone of excellence and or their genius. And I love to let them do that. I love to contribute to the economy in a positive way, to let the money flow to them. And I love not investing my time in something that I don't enjoy doing.
That's it. So that's the eliminate, delegate conversation, right? Whatever that can be and why. So I think this is where I got to give me more time. If I'm not doing X, Y, then it gives me more time. And I really let go of that. I'm like, I don't, the clock is the clock. I mean, my experience of time is either I think this is where the consciousness piece fit in with me. By the way, I wanted to rewind because I did skip over this too. Part of my obsession a little bit with time came from one of my professors when I was doing clinical research. You always have variables that you're trying to control, right? There's the control group, and then you have all these interventions that you're doing. You're trying to, and so as I was working on one of my projects, she's like, look, don't forget, time is always a variable. As we were setting up all the statistics stuff. And that, when you talk about remembering something that someone said to you, you were in a specific place, I know exactly where I was standing when she said that to me. And for some reason, that has always lived in my head. Time is always a variable.
What does that mean? Explain to me what time is. I mean, I in context, I think I know it, but explain to me the importance and how does that relate to our day-to-day thinking about things?
Yeah, well, for me, I know one day I'm going to die.
Yeah.
So, if I put time on a maybe continuum might not be the right way to look at it, but if I do put it in that sort of framework, no matter what I'm doing, when I'm making a choice, I'm recognizing that what if this were the last choice I was to make? What if this were the last moment, and you never know? Right? What if this was the last moment that Cliff and I are going to be together? I get up, I walk out, I get hit by a car, whatever. Like, what if? And so it really, the time is a variable brought to my attention, really, that I think that moment of like, I am existing in this moment in time, and whatever I'm choosing to do, I am putting it up against where I'm going to end up in the rest of my life. That's the investment side of it. So it just always was it just always has lived as a variable for me. When I choose to spend time doing the podcast, I'm not doing something else.
Yeah.
Right. There's another thing that I'm saying no to. There's a thing that I'm saying yes to. And when I make that yes, what is it that I'm intending? Right. What is it when I look at the whole scope of my life? What is it? Will it matter? Will it be significant in my life? Will it be significant right now? Will it matter to you, to me, that we did this podcast together? My story for myself is yes. I hope it is for you too. And will it be significant?
I wouldn't be here if it wasn't.
Exactly. And so I think she was saying it in a research context. She wasn't being metaphorical about it, but it landed for me very metaphorically.
So as I hear you explain it that way, the way that I relate to, I think, the same concept, and tell me if this sounds like it applies, is when I think about anything that I'm going to commit my time to, the way that I think is does this align with my values and priorities as I've consciously stated them to be?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge one.
Is this where, if this were the last day of my life, would I have been happy with the fact that I chose to do the things I did today?
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of ways that I kind of relate to, I think, what you're saying there.
Yeah, I would agree. And time is, I know that there's the part of us that goes on to some degree forever. And, as far as I can tell, this consciousness will get what it gets. Right, for a certain period of time, and then this iteration may not exist. I don't know. So in the meantime, how am I making the most of it in a sense, right? Where am I investing my time? Am I giving enough attention to the things that are important to me, that align with my values, that make the world just a little bit better place than when I found it, Yeah. So that's how it lived for me when she said it. And I also recognize that there is the clock. By the way, and I'll say this because you and I have read the book, The Big Leap. I think Gay Hendricks writing in the one chapter on time in the book, The Big Leap, is probably one of the best that I've ever read on, the idea of Newtonian time and then Einstein time and then all that came out of meditation and mindfulness research about what you were talking about earlier, Cliff, with, how we are relating to this moment matters more than anything.
Yeah.
And it does. And I think that's true in my experience for sure. And I know that there is the clock. And so day by day, and this is what you were talking about just now with journaling, right? Day by day, you're also making these very practical decisions. When we start talking about delegating and eliminating things, there is the clock does exist. There are only, according to this clock, 24 hours in the day. So use it wisely. And it is a variable.
One of the results that I have found about being very intentional about where I'm investing my time, specifically in those buckets that I referred to for myself earlier. Mm-hmm. I am paid as a coach, and I am able to earn in 12 hours a week of coaching what I used to earn in 40 to 60 hours a week of doing other work.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say, well, Cliff, that's because you're you. That's because of this and all of these other things. Like, well, have you ever thought maybe what it took to become, me, who I am today? Would you like to Would you like to hear the story of how I used to not be who I am today? Are you interested in learning how I've invested my time, effort, and energy to become who I am today?
Yes.
Because I would be delighted to share with you, and you may be surprised to know that it's available to you as well.
Yeah. Nailed it.
So when I think about it, it's like, sure, I might spend or invest 4 or 5 hours on a daily basis reading, studying, note-taking, all of this stuff, while other people are working really hard with their hands and doing all this other stuff and all this other stuff. And I may not be directly earning a penny. That's sometimes 30 hours a week that I'm doing stuff that does not produce income. And I question whether am I working or playing, but anyway.
Well, I would say maybe doesn't directly.
It doesn't direct. However, when I get into a coaching session and I use sometimes the prosperous coach method, would you like more of this, what I've given you as a complimentary experience? They're like, yes, sign me up. And that averages like somewhere between 800 or more an hour. And I'm like, how do you get to the place where you can earn 800 or more an hour? And that's because I've invested so much time here. Let's have a conversation. I can ask you questions and I can see things, and I have lots of experiences. I got lots of stuff to draw from. And it's because of the investments that I've made.
Exactly. And you want to be incredibly genius. And you are incredibly genius at what you're doing when you're coaching with people too. So all of that study, it reminds me of, me becoming a coach or when I was a physical therapist. I mean, you're reading all the time. You want to be incredible. I mean, there's a certain level of beauty and responsibility that comes with that when you're working with other people, right? To provide service and care for people. So you want to be the best that you can be at it. And I think that's probably true for many people in their work. They want to be high performers. They want to be as proficient as they can. They want to be as best at as they can be, no matter what it is. So if you're just happen to be doing it in that realm. So it looks like you're not getting paid for it. Indirectly, maybe you're not, or directly, maybe you're not.
Directly, it appears that Cliff's spending a lot of time in the front seat of his car, sitting in the back parking lot of Planet Fitness, reading and studying and meditating and journaling and creating.
Who's that guy?
What's he doing? I know the police officers sometimes come around. It's like they pause. I'm sure they take note of my license plate. What's this guy doing?
They see the camera and they see this weird equipment. They're like, "What is this guy doing in this parking lot?"
That's great.
So yes, so being intentional. I think just to sort of summarize, like being intentional about our consciousness. I think the internal, where you're investing your time, and the external.
And I would say, in you speak about this with the consciousness, but the awareness. Do you even know?
Yeah, do you even know?
Do you even know? And maybe you don't want to go grab this atimelogger.com app, but one of the things that I have done that has been incredibly helpful is just to get a sheet of paper or create any sort of digital document, any note on your phone or whatever, and just create a bullet point list. And anytime you are doing something or have done something, write the time and just jot a note about what it was. And at the end of the day, review it. It's like, it is so eye-opening when you become aware of what you're doing.
Yes, it is eye-opening. And, I'll put this in the show notes because I cannot remember the direct name of it right now. But there's also on the other side. So we have Time Logger. Here's what you're doing in your life, how you're spending your emotional life. There's an app that I used to use where I would track my emotions in the day.
Oh, yeah.
I will put it in the show notes because I want to make sure I get the right name of the app. It was created by an endowment from, I want to say Duke University. It's excellent. And that really brought my attention to, wow, how much time, and they don't necessarily make you write down how much are you complaining to yourself, but I could tell by my positive and negative emotion what was starting to happen.
Yeah.
And that's a big one. Yeah.
Daphne, call to action.
Yes. So I wanted to bring people's attention to my book, Waking Up a Leader, The 5 Relationships of Success. You can get it on Amazon. And the book is really geared toward people who, the first half of the book is really geared around mindfulness and awareness and developing the awareness that we just talked about today on the show. And then the last half of the book is about the 5 relationships, what I call the 5 relationships success. So success, how we relate to time, how we relate to money, how we relate to the idea of a self, our existence, how we relate to friends and family. And there is no chapter in there about how we relate to work. It's very intentional. So go figure. So there's quite a bit about my story in there as well that people might be interested in. And when you talked about sort of how making the shifts in your life, and there's quite a bit in there about that. And nevertheless, the other part that I wanted to add to this is that if you get the book, you can go to my website, daphne-scott.com. There is a book resources tab. You put in your email, and then you have access to all the different resources that go with each chapter of the book as well. You could get those resources without buying the book. You don't need to buy the book to get the resources. However, they will be much more meaningful to you if you are reading the book and going through those exercises and going through the resources that exist with each chapter too. So Waking Up a Leader, 5 Relationships of Success. You can get it on Amazon.
Awesome. My call to action is for the business owners out there, full-time self-employed folks. If you are out there and it feels lonely at the top, I would love to have you check out nextlevelmastermind.info. Again, that's not .com. It is nextlevelmastermind.info, because that's where you're going to get the info on the Next Level Mastermind. If you would like to benefit from the education, experience, the expertise, the skills, talents, and abilities of other full-time self-employed business owners, we're looking at people who are making at least 6 figures minimum every year in their business. That's what this group is for. It is an incredible peer group that will help you get clarity and give you meaningful feedback from people who understand the decisions you're facing on a daily basis. And if you are an aspiring or early stage entrepreneur or self-employed business owner, then I want to let you know that I am starting a brand new group coaching program. And if you want details about that, helping you take your business, if you're making less than $10,000 a month, that goes anywhere from 0 to $10,000 a month, reach out to me, put early stage entrepreneur or early stage in the subject line. Email me, cliff@cliffravenscraft.com. I would love to tell you all of the details about this brand new group coaching program. And by the way, I have helped tens of thousands of people around the world launch their message into an online business.
Beautiful. That's a great call to action.
Awesome. Daphne?
All right.
Next week, we are talking about what? Did you remember?
Equanimity. Yes.
Equanimity.
We will talk about equanimity.
I am neither excited or upset about it. I am just totally cool with it being what it is.
Either way, who knows? Good or bad. We can't tell.
All right. Until next time, we encourage you to choose your own adventure.